Hi, would you introduce yourself to our class?
Okay. My name is Samantha Ramsay. I'm a registered dietitian. I'm an assistant professor of foods and nutrition at the University of Idaho, and I'm also the director of the coordinated program in dietetics.
Wow, that sounds like a big job. How did you get involved in conference planning?
I actually began my first experience with conference planning was working in a class, much like all of you, and I was given the opportunity to gain experience in learning how to put a conference together and what goes on behind the scenes with doing a conference. In addition to that, as part of our dietetic association, we host a national conference each year, which is the Food and Nutrition Conference and Expo. It was formerly the American Dietetic Association, but now we're the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. And then in addition to that, each state holds their own dietetic conference. I have attended our national conference a couple times, and then I've also attended multiple conferences hosted by the Idaho Dietetic Association.
So you got involved in putting one on how?
So how it is structured within our association, within our state, is that those who are on the who serve on our board, so who are president, VP, nominating committee, etc., they are involved in leading the organization of the conference, and then the rest of those who are serving also help support it, and then they try to get volunteers. So I've served on the nominating committee for the Idaho Dietetic Association, which kind of put me into the role, but then I also volunteered to help host a conference here in Coeur d'Alene.
So did you do this on a committee then?
Yes, it is a committee. So our president will contact dietitians within the area that the conference is being held, and for volunteers. And then you go through this process of deciding location, food, presenters, keynote, vendors, the details of what is involved in the conference. And because we don't hire a specific individual or committee to do it, it is volunteer work.
So how'd you get started then? Could you just walk us through kind of the logistics of getting going on planning?
So we have, it is just our habit to offer our conference during the spring in the month of either April or May. Shortly after that spring conference, the VP, who is now the president, then starts to send out feelers for those who would be interested in being involved in planning. Within probably 2 months after the conference, so definitely by the summer, the email by our president is sent out to inquire on everyone putting it together.
So once you get started on knowing when your conference is going to be, how do you actually attack the planning part of it? Can you walk us through the details?
Well, in all honesty, a lot of times people come in going, okay, now what? What do you want us to do? And then people are like, I don't know, what do you think we should do? But those who've done conferences before, and then in my case, I had some experience with conference. So what I had is kind of a check sheet for what we needed to do. And the first step I would probably emphasize is getting your keynotes. Actually getting your location and your keynotes, because both of them take a lot of time.
The keynote being the primary speaker.
Primary speakers. You want the keynotes are going to be the people who you think are going to draw your participants or your attendees to the conference. So if your keynotes are mediocre, then people aren't going to come. So you want to pull in, kind of go with what's hot topics for us in nutrition, what are dietitians really wanting to find out about, and then you send out letters of inquiry, and you basically get everyone on board to make contacts to bring somebody in. And there's a number of different ways we've done that. People have volunteered names of people they've seen present at other conferences. They've looked at, okay, what particular area in dietetics is really needing to be discussed, and then we try to find somebody who fits within that area. We do try to find somebody who's supportive of the field of dietetics. We don't, it's just keep within the scope. You really have to think about your attendees. What is it that they're going to want to hear? So once we get the keynote and then we start working on the location, then it's getting your other speakers in place. So same process, but you have a bit more flexibility. It's not as pressing to try to get those speaker slots filled in. While you're getting names of speakers, you start to put together the schedule of the conference. So it's filling slots and then trying to decide, okay, depending on how many speakers you have, depending on your keynote speaker and what days they're interested in speaking, you start to outline that schedule. And it's
like a timeline.
It is a timeline. Mm-hmm. And then you identify, okay, so you might be setting keynote speakers up, but then you're going to have breakout sessions, or maybe you choose not to have breakout sessions, which are in a set period of time. You might have 4 speakers. And so you give your attendees...
So those are concurrent workshop or sessions.
So it would be giving your attendees the opportunity to choose what type of speaker they would want to listen to. And that also is another little scheduling nightmare, because if you can get 4 breakout sessions, or do you do 2 breakout sessions, or I mean, at the conference, for our national conference, there'll be probably close to 10 breakout sessions with at least 2 keynote speakers each day, and that's for a 3-day conference. Also, you have pre-conference if you choose to do so. Some conferences choose to offer pre-conference, and usually it's a set theme. And each conference does have a theme. I didn't mention that.
We'll talk about that when
okay.
Go ahead and logistics, and then we'll talk about themes.
So the pre-conference might have a sub-theme or a completely separate theme, but it's just another means in which to see whether you can address a topic that's of interest to your attendees and pull them in, let's say a half day or a day before the actual dates of the conference.
So what happens then after you've done the timeline and you've figured out the concurrent sessions, and what happens then? You've got it all decided on what you're going to do.
Well, I should say, I mean, all this does overlap, because it's not like you go, oh, keynotes, check. And now we got the location, check. What it actually, I mean, you're trying to do all these at the same time, and the location gets a little tricky, because you need to have that right up front. I mean, and that's why I said you want to get the keynotes in your location right away, because if you don't have your location set, you don't know what facilities you have to work with. So you can't plan for breakout sessions if you're in a location that doesn't have the space for doing a breakout session. So you have to find locations that fit, and there aren't a lot of facilities that are conducive to hosting a conference. So you're limited in what locations, unless you're in a big city where you have obviously a lot more choices. But in more rural areas, it can be a little bit more difficult to find location. So back to your question, in terms of what do, you have your schedule outlined. I'll say you don't really, even 2 or 3 weeks before, you might be trying to find a speaker that couldn't make it or something, but at least you have your schedule in place. If you have your location in place, the other things you're going to be doing concurrently is going to be working on, like, your menu. What types of food do you want to offer? How do you want to offer the food? What's the price of the food? Which will dictate the price of the conference. And then also, how are you going to get rooms comped? So discounted rooms for people depending on where you're hosting the conference, and if you even want to do that. Other things you'll be doing is vendors. That's a big one. Vendors take a lot of time. It's pretty much, you probably want to create a form, which we have kind of mock forms and letters that we have in place that just sends out to companies to say, would you be interested in being a vendor at our Idaho Dietetic Association?
It's kind of an exhibition.
Mm-hmm. It's an exhibition. Mm-hmm. So you send out the letters to the vendors, and usually there's a price put on that. So a vendor might pay $500 to be able to have a booth as part of that exhibition. Obviously, your bigger conferences, the Food Nutrition Conference and Expo, it's huge. I know I have pictures if you ever want to see.
How many attendees would you say?
You can get up to 20,000 at the National Food Nutrition Conference and
That's
Expo.
Impressive. At
the Idaho Dietetic Association, we get like 150.
Still.
to 200.
You have to go through the same process, don't you?
But yes, and it's just on the scale is much different. But you're doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
You're always having to kind of manage it and piece it together, Let's see, what else do they have? The vendors, they do purchase their booth, and you can choose to have them choose to purchase one day booth, or they can, for $1,000 you double it, they can do 2 days, or maybe get a discount if they are there both days, or however it kind of works for the organization that you're working with.
And then you schedule time within your conference schedule for the attendees to go through the trade show or the exhibition?
You can. So it depends on the extent. Like the Idaho Dietetic Association meetings, we do, because it's a smaller scale. But at the FNCE conference, it's so big.
Just open all the time.
It is open all the time, and there's so many different breakout sessions. I mean, you have the opportunity to go to. I mean, if I go to that, I can see probably 15 different sessions.
So it just
which
depends.
is huge. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So let's talk about the themes. You had mentioned themes a little bit
Yes.
earlier. What is the theme, and how does that work?
So generally, from my experience with conferences, you select kind of an overarching theme, and the theme just kind of gives a I don't know, it can be like a slogan, a name. It can be motivational. It's just a way to set a tone for how you want the conference.
Everything together.
It does. It brings it. It packages it. And so when you have your when you have keynote speakers, or if you have, like, we have our president usually gets up and will speak, it's a way to kind of present
and to market
and let everyone know. In terms of the themes, you want to pick something broad that's not really, really specific. I mean, you want it to cover a lot of different potential educational areas, because you want to appeal to as many people as possible. If you in the field of dietetics, if I say, I'm going to do a theme of holistic nutrition care, well, I might be eliminating a huge group who isn't really as involved in holistic
So what would a theme be? Can you think of one you used?
Oh gosh, I can bring up the ones from I can pull out like 5 conference books. What is the one that FNCE I just went to? Can I cheat? Can I just look?
Yeah, go ahead. It's all right.
Do you want to pause
Actually, it's not really that critical to our conversation. I was just wondering.
My brain can't come up with anything creative
right now. It may pop
now.
into your head, but the takeaway there is that it's important to have a theme for a conference in order to be able to pull it together and to market it.
Exactly.
And to tell people what you're going to be talking about. Because it sounds to me like the goal of most of your conferences is education.
Yes.
And education specifically toward dietetic education.
Mm-hmm.
And so that would actually answer the question of who your audience is, because there are other educators and other folks that are involved in that particular area.
So I came up with an idea.
Right. Okay.
Like a theme might be moving forward in the future of dietetics.
Well, and given your experience and what you've done, what would you say that you did right, and that you were spot on in your planning, and that it turned out well, or what you were expecting to happen? What makes a successful conference to you?
What makes a successful conference is planning. I mean, you can't do last minute. Conference planning is that. It is, you want to lock in your speakers early, your location early. You don't want to be spending the week before the conference trying to tie up loose ends. You want to have everything lined up, a month or two in advance. I mean, at the latest. And then any details you have those last few weeks are just polishing, just minor details that you might want to address. And then also thinking in terms of, getting people together, like who's gonna be at the front desk to check people in, and who, the lanyards, who helps get the lanyards put together, and okay, what kind of gift bags do you want to give out, and what materials do you want to, what about